Hill in the gun with Hill to his right. Play action to the right. Steps up, throws over the middle. He's got Thornton. Caught it! Junior Thornton. Split. 6. Touchdown. Midway.
Smoaky.com presents the Texas High School Football Show on Sikkim 365 Radio. Brought to you by Peters Chevrolet, Bubba's 33, TFNB, your bank for life, and Texas Farm Bureau Insurance.
Hill, right side, finds a seam. Hill, 20. Hill, 10. Hill, touchdown. Midway, no flags. Midway takes the lead by more than one score. And how about the Big Uglies inside?
Now, here's David Smoak.
It is week number 8 of the Texas high school football season. Week 8. There are 11 regular season weeks if you count non-district teams that have an off week. And then, of course, how many games you may play in district. But we are now looking at the stretch drive as we hit the early and now mid part of October. We'll look back at some of the better wins from last week. We'll look ahead later in the show to the better games of this week. Also, a couple of historical notes about Texas high school football. And we also feature 2 schools right off the hip of Fort Hood, the great post of Fort Hood, the Army base and post, with Harker Heights, who's having a really, really good year with Jerry Edwards as the head coach. He's been there a while. And then, of course, Tony Johnson, first year at Copperas, Cove. They're struggling, but about being a part of the military area and the comings and goings of players. And sometimes you get a guy, and the next thing you know, his father or mother might be shipped somewhere else as far as military commitment. Last week, a couple of games, 3 or 4, maybe 7, 8 games. Gilmer beat Pleasant Grove. That is a great game every year. Pleasant Grove had their nice run. They are not quite that level, but they're still good, and we know how Gilmer is. 35-14, the Buckeyes win. Cherokee beat Richland Springs 78-47. This one here, I was like, okay, is that score flipped? We will have an historical perspective about that win for Cherokee against Richland Springs in a district game in the third segment of today's show. Chilton 41, Bremond 30, a really nice win for Chilton. You know, Bremond and Jeff Kozowski are very, very good, but Chilton is really good, and that's a nice win for them. Also, Kilgore beat Lindale 49-31. Isaiah Ross, Kilgore running back, 323 yards rushing, scored just the 1 touchdown, but you have Kilgore and you have Lindale, and, you know, this year Hallsville's better. And we know Carthage and Gilmer in different levels of 4A, how good they are. Chapel Hill had a nice win against Jacksonville with Jeff Reardon, their head coach. Burleson has Centennial High School, and what a run they are. And I think we're going to feature them in the next week or two. They beat Denton Ryan 23-16. We featured that game last week, the longtime Highway 37 rivalry with Mount Vernon and Winsboro. Winsboro won that game 28-14. Nice win for Josh Finney over Mount Vernon and Brad Willard. Crawford and Marlin, 33-20. Crawford, they might meet again in the same district in Class 2A Division I. They might see each other down the road. Without Darian Gullett, obviously, it's been not quite what Marlin had last year, but they're still very much a part of that picture. Duncanville and DeSoto are the class of 11 6A, but Waxahachie, I've mentioned this probably more than one time. What they're doing in that district is impressive. Duncanville beat Waxahachie 24-7. DeSoto is loaded. We'll have Claude Mathis on. And Reggie Samples of Duncanville very soon. North Shore 34-27 over Summer Creek. I knew that would be good. I knew it would be a hell of a game, and it was. And North Shore wins by 7. Now, a couple of historical perspectives. I try to give you a couple of different graphics, historical perspective in Texas high school football. The first one is consecutive non-losing seasons. So if you go 5-5, that continues the stretch of a non-losing season. You go 4-6, you're done. It means the streak is over. Here are among the top 5 all-time longest streaks of being 500 or better, and 2 of them are current, the top 2. West Orange Stark, 38 consecutive years, started back in 1984, and currently even this year, they had 38 consecutive winning seasons. Most likely make it 39. Their schedule this year, of course, as always, is very, very good. Houston Lamar, since 1985, every year, 37 consecutive non-losing seasons. And the number to the right, the parentheses, 1 next to West Orange Stark, 2 next to Lamar, that's how many 500 teams they've had during this stretch. So it's not like they've had a bunch. Plano, they ran Texas for the longest of time, 1959 to 1990. Port Arthur High School from 1927 to 1960. Now, that's 34 consecutive seasons, the stretch they had. 2 teams at 33. Universal City Randolph is where I played football my senior year. Military brat, went to 3 high schools in 4 years, 3 of those years in Japan. My last year was under the great Bob Mickler. Universal City Randolph, just on the northeast side of San Antonio, Randolph Air Force Base, from 1963 to 1995, 33 consecutive non-losing seasons. Brownwood, in their great run, 33 as well. Now, most unbeaten seasons. This means in the regular season, does not count the playoffs. This is not unbeaten district. This is not district championships. But if you go unbeaten during the regular season, of course, that comes with it. Refugio, 24 times in their history they've had unbeaten years. Highland Park, 21. Salina, Cuero, and South Lake Carroll each have had 18 unbeaten regular seasons. When we come back, Jerry Edwards and Harker Heights, the Knights are really good. I saw them play a couple of weeks ago against Midway. They've got a dynamic running back in Rashawn Sanford. They got a defense that plays like their head coach, fiery and very tough, and they're good. And they're in District 12, 6A, and it's going to come down to Harker Heights and Temple, who wins that district when they eventually play. Jerry Edwards will join us. Also, Tony Johnson of Copperas Cove will join us. The best games of the weeks, we'll have that as well. This is the High School Football Podcast, powered by 365 Sports and Smoaky.com.
Pizza, burgers, and Bears football. There's no place around Waco that serves them all other than Bubba's 33. Come show your green and gold and enjoy some of Waco's best food and beverages while watching your favorite team, the Bears. When real Bears fans get hungry, Bubba's 33 is the #1 spot for ice-cold drinks, hand-stretched, stone-baked pizzas, and bacon-infused burgers. Join us for indoor or patio dining. Bubba's 33, Waco's restaurant and proud supporter of Baylor Bears football. Sick 'em, Bears!
TFNB Your Bank for Life is the official local bank of Baylor Athletics. Find out why more Central Texas are making TFNB their bank for life. Sign up for our Edge checking and savings accounts to earn interest or cash back. With 5 convenient locations and an award-winning mobile app, banking has never been easier. TFNB Your Bank for Life. Member FDIC.
Smoaky.com presents the Texas High School Football Show on 365 Sports. Brought to you by Peters Chevrolet, Bubba's 33, TFNB Your Bank for Life, and Texas Farm Bureau Insurance.
We are now joined by Harker Heights head football coach Jerry Edwards, his 10th year at Harker Heights, part of Killeen ISD, and he joins us on the statewide high school football podcast. Jerry, there's been a lot of changes with a lot of the different coaches in that area, in that school district, and you have been the consistent, the constant, the 10th year there. What is it about Killeen ISD and also Harker Heights that has made it comfortable for you?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me on the show. I always love to talk about Harker Heights. And, it has been, I've been here 10 years. I've seen a lot of coaching changes go throughout Killeen ISD. But, my family bleeds red and black. I was taught by my dad, water the ground where your feet are. And Harker Heights has been extremely good to me and us. And, it's taken a little while to get some consistency, with the military town. That was the one thing when I got here 10 years ago, I wasn't quite fully prepared for. But you learn to adapt and overcome. And we just had a really good group of kids that have stayed with us and been consistent the last few years to enable us to put some winning teams out on the football field. But, I talk about rep the shield all the time. And, as the head football coach and athletic coordinator, we just kind of bought into that. And we just do the best we can we were at and try to make our program and our kids as successful as we can.
You may not know this, but I'm a military brat that moved all over the world, lived in Japan, Guam, Washington, D.C., Tempe, Arizona, San Antonio, Nebraska is where I was born. And I played for high schools that were on Air Force bases and installations. Yours, of course, next to the great post of Fort Hood. What are the challenges? And how often, when you think you have somebody that's a part of the program that's really good or just depth at a position, next thing you know, their mother or father are moved? How often does that happen?
Well, when I first got here, it happened quite a bit, and I really wasn't prepared for that, to be honest with you. I quickly learned that what PCS stands for, and those are words that you don't want to hear as a coach, because that means that they're changing stations or moving to a new base. So early on, when I got to Harker Heights, here at Harker Heights, a lot of the officers attend our school, their kids attend our school. And so, as well as I do, that, the officers are constantly moving every 2 or 3 years to a different base. And so that was really hard for me because, you would see a kid as an 8th grader or even a freshman, and then you would build them and mold them and go through the off season with them. And then their junior, senior year, their parents would get PCS out or their dad would get deployed and they were moving back home with grandmother. So that was really hard. But, over the last few years, probably the last 5 years, the military population, the civilian population is starting to overcome the military population here in town. When they built the new hospital here on post, you got a lot of families that are retiring and stay in the area. And you can see that within our program. Last year's group with Maple and Carter was kind of really the first group I watched as 8th graders go from 8th grade all the way through our program. And then this year's with Rashawn and Amir and Chapman, I watched those kids play in our feeder pattern and they've stayed through our program. So we've been able to be consistent, which is, as a coach, that's what you want and what I was used to when I was at Mansfield and Clements, seeing young kids and to develop them over time and not moving away. And so that's really what's helped us get on track and stay on track here at Harker Heights.
And you guys weren't affected as much as other schools were inside Killeen ISD with Chaparral opening up, were you?
A little bit. We did lose a small portion. The biggest thing is, Killeen ISD allowed kids to grandfather in, and our grandfathering rate was extremely high. Not only are we successful on the field in football, but all our programs have been highly successful academically, extracurricular, and so we had a lot of kids that wanted to stay here at Harker Heights and not go to the new school. So I do think over the next few years, we will start seeing a little bit, because we did have some kids zoned out that were previously zoned to Harker Heights. I will see our numbers start to drop just a little bit. And I saw that this year in our freshman football. We had, 10, 15 less kids than we normally do. And I think that's a tribute to the new school opening.
In the way of in and out, with the constant change as a military family, and you mentioned now that the civilians are now becoming a large number in that Killeen area as well, but what would you say was the ratio of you getting someone who moved in who could help you or having someone who was helping you move out? Was it almost a 50-50 or like a one-for-one trade, or was it one way or the other more often?
It was early on in my career. It was high here at Harker Heights. I tell this story all the time. When I first got here, when I took the job 10 years ago, my first freshman class had about 85 freshmen in it. And then we went back and looked 4 years later at that group, and we only had 23 seniors from that group. We had about 26 or so just quit football and stopped playing football, but we had over 35, almost 40 kids PCS out or move away. And that was really, really difficult to take and hard for me to wrap my head around. But we got used to it. You got to overcome, adapt wherever you're at, whatever school you're at, you're going to have challenges. That was our challenge. And so we kind of started paying a little bit more attention to which kids were military kids and could possibly whose dads were officers or mom were officers, or who were getting deployed, to kind of try to balance that out. But we don't have as much of that as we used to. It's a very, very small percentage that are moving on us now versus in the past. We would probably have about 60% of those kids at some point in time PCS away.
Well, I saw you a couple of weeks ago, as you know, in your game against Midway, very competitive game, and then you made some big plays at the right time. Diabre Hood had oh my goodness, a spectacular 109-yard interception return that just basically broke Midway's back. You play fantastic defense. That's what you're known for. You've been a defensive coordinator. That's kind of the grit of a Jerry Edwards team. Your thoughts about this team? You're coming off that 9-2. You're heavily favored along with Temple to win the district title in 12-6A. This team is good. You had the tough loss when you blew the lead against Permian out in Odessa. Long trip. Did you know this team could be in this same position you're in right now when it started?
Yes, I did. We had a tremendous year last year, and we had a lot of those kids coming back and returning. And so we felt like this team had a chance to be really, really good. I knew that our district was going to be tougher. I think when you add in Hutto and Weiss and some of those teams that we added, and some of the teams we lost, I thought our district schedule was going to be tougher, and then our non-district schedule got a lot tougher. I think we played. 3 perennial playoff teams, and if you look at their records right now, those teams are still doing extremely well. But I knew with this team that we had a shot, to win a lot of football games. And, we've been able to prove that, in non-district, we went 3-1. You alluded to the Permian game. We played a tremendous first half and just didn't play really well the second half. But, sometimes there's value in losing. And I thought we got more out of that game. Losing that game than we would have winning. And I know nobody ever wants to hear that, but it really did. It kind of refocused us. And right before district is when we needed it the most. And, we've been in tight games with Weiss early. We were in a tight game with Midway late, and then we were down at half against Hutto. But the resiliency of our team to bounce back and play good defense and score when we needed to score kind of showed through. And I think a lot of that attributed to the teams we played in non-district, and especially going back to that loss to Permian. I think our guys realized that, you got to play for 4 quarters, and you can't just coast through any half, and you just got to play extremely good and not to give up. And I think they learned that by watching Permian. I mean, Permian didn't give up. They battled and fought and clawed their way back in and won that game. And so our kids were able to take some learning lessons from that game. And I think it's made us a better football team.
Rashawn Sanford, who's committed to Houston, is a spectacular, dynamic player. And I know you were able to get him out in the passing game. So he also has great hands as a receiver against Midway. Obviously, Chapman, Rapati, both of them offensive lineman, Texas and UTSA. And then I mentioned Hood and the 109-yard interception return, who can play pretty much anywhere as well. But it's more than them. They're the ones that probably get most of the headlines, but it's more than them. How is the chemistry of this team with such high-profile type players, and how this team is kind of molded together with camaraderie?
They're really good. And I think that's probably a tribute to our team and our program. I think, we do have some big time names, but you wouldn't know it at practice. I mean, they all push each other and get after each other. There's a lot of unsung heroes that, like you said, don't get all the press clippings. But defensively this year, our defensive line has just been outstanding. We got a good group of linebackers behind them. We've moved some guys around, that used to play other positions. Marcus Moultrie, our safety, who's been a key force in the secondary, was a backup running back. This is his first year ever play safety. We made the move in spring. And then Chris Robinson, our defensive end, number 5. Last year we moved him a receiver to DN. But it's our kids' trust in the coaches. It's the trust in each other. That they will go, coach, wherever you need us, whatever you need us to do. If it'll help us win football games, you got our full support. And those kids do that. And I think that just goes with the continuity of me and our staff being here for so long. My assistant, my offensive coordinator, has been with me for 9 years. A lot of those guys on my staff have been with me this entire time. So they understand what our vision is, and the kids buy in. And I think the team chemistry is awesome, but it's outside of football where they bond and get along, and our coaches do a good job of connecting with kids. And that's really helped it's just the unselfish play, and whatever it takes to win, they're going to do.
Jerry Edwards is a graduate of Quitman High School in East Texas and also went to Texas A&M. Jerry, I spoke with Jeff Hume earlier today. I said, hey, I need to know a couple more things about Jerry. And I've known you since you arrived from doing the radio show and also Midway football for the longest of time. We had the 1 year we didn't do it in 2020, but we're back, and it's exciting. I love what you're doing there. So he told me there was a game against Cedar Hill, and you guys were winning, I think, by maybe just over a touchdown or so. You're the defensive coordinator, and Cedar Hill runs a kickoff back late in the game to the 5-yard line, and then, I don't know if it was the next play, they scored. And Jeff Hume's on the sideline, your head coach at Mansfield, and he said, hey, what happened there? and he said you exploded. What happened? We gave up a 95-yard kickoff return. You remember that story. He said you guys went back and forth. You love each other. You're like brothers. But I wanted to bring that up because he said his defense plays the way Jerry is. He's very fiery.
Yes, I'm a fiery coach. I mean, I coach hard and I love hard. But Coach Hume, I wouldn't be the head coach I am today if I wouldn't have spent 9 years with Coach Hume. He taught me a lot about being a head coach and what it takes to win and put winning programs together and how to treat kids and your staff. And he did a good job of doing that. And he told me early on in my career, he goes, "There's two people that get yelled at the most. That's the defensive coordinator and offensive line coach." And so I was prepared for that. I always want to compete and I always want to be our best I can. And that was, when you play Cedar Hill back then at Mansfield, we were getting that program rolling and going to the playoffs every year. And that was a critical game. He come over there casually and goes, "Hey, what'd they do there?" And I was still mad because when you give up 80 yards on the kickoff and, you're trying to stop the kids that Cedar Hill had at the time, it was extremely difficult, and you can't give them a short yard. And they scored real quick, and I was mad they scored, and so I popped off. And typically didn't do that to Coach Hume a lot, but he got it. He gave me it right back.
Well, you guys won the game. There was big hugs and kisses and all that other stuff, so to speak. And then, of course, you told the team, "Hey, this is," and Jeff used to tell the players, "Hey, don't get too caught up when we start barking at each other." Not just you and him, but coaches in general. He told me that, or he mentioned that when you were hired at Mansfield, that you had just gotten married. I think you started out as a JV coach, became the defensive line coach, and then, of course, the coordinator. He said you had just gotten married, and the way and now you have 3 children as well. You've done it the right way, the way you've done, the ladder of coaching, and now it's, of course, paying off for you. Do you remember that time as a young, just gotten married, getting into coaching, and I think may have had a child pretty quickly after that?
Yeah. So, when I first got into coaching, year 3, Coach Hume hired me out at Fort Bend Clements, actually, is where we went there. And I went in and, I knew my goal was to be a head coach one day. So anything that I could do would be around the varsity staff. Then I had the opportunity to move up and be a D-line coach. And then when Coach Hume was offered the job at Mansfield, he called me in his office and said, "Hey, I want you to go with me." And I thought that was a huge compliment and, trust in my abilities. And so I told him it was a no-brainer. I'm from East Texas, like you mentioned earlier. The humidity and the mosquitoes and the traffic weren't for me in Houston. So I was ready to get back to the Dallas area. And so I jumped on it, and then it just worked out. He promoted me to defensive coordinator. And we had 5 really tremendous years at Mansfield High School, and allowed me to have the opportunity to become here as a head coach and at a young age. And, that's just kind of, how I was taught as a young coach, stick where you're at, grow where you're at, become the best you can be at where you're at. And that's what I've been able to do. And I've been just very fortunate. And like I said, there's not enough words for what Coach Hume has done for me as a coach.
Well, Mansfield, and then, of course, he did a hell of a job at Midway, took him to a state championship game, and now at a program he's trying to rebuild, a very young program at Legacy. One more thing, Jerry, if you don't mind. Duncanville, DeSoto, Waxahachie, most likely it appears Mansfield in that district 11-6A, and I saw that, and they've played the district before in the playoffs, but I saw Midway just get battered in that district. It's so good, especially when you have Duncanville, DeSoto, and what Waxahachie's become. And then, of course, Mansfield. It's a challenge. Is that something that is almost like always in the corner as you proceed towards this time of the year, knowing what that district is when you play them in the opening round? And, of course, how it all shakes out, Division I or II?
Yeah, it is. It's extremely tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Our by-district matchup the last 3 years for us has been, it's a state title contender right out the gate, first round. And you think about the football teams that we've had here at Harker Heights, and, you take that same team and it, very comparable to some of the teams we had at Mansfield when I was DC there that would go, 2 or 3 rounds deep every year. And so, you have that type of team. And, when you face a state title contender, 3 years ago, we faced Rockwall, went to the state semis that year. They had the kid that's the wide receiver at Ohio State now. And then, the very next year you play Duncanville, plays in the state finals. And then last year played DeSoto, who loses to Duncanville in the regional championship. So it is difficult, but it's the game of football. It's 6A football. You play big boys, and it's big boy football, and you got to be prepared and play who you play. And so we focus on getting to the playoffs, and then when we get to the playoffs, who are they match us up with? We're going to go out there and play the best football that we can as Harker Heights and rep the shield and do what we can. And I don't know who we'll get. Now I do know that we're not D1 anymore. We went from the biggest school in the district to the smallest school, so we will be Division II. But it all depends on who makes it in our district, who makes it in the other districts, who we'll wind up with.
Well, at least you don't have to do the guessing game, which can come down to the last minute of every week. You know where you're going to go, just depending on what two teams it might be. Jerry, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. I enjoy watching your team a couple weeks ago in that win against Midway, and also appreciate what you've done there with those particular young men and also athletes on the entire campus at Harker Heights and Killeen. Have a great week. Good luck, and enjoy the off week, but good luck against Temple in a couple of weeks.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Smoke. Go Knights.
Yeah, you too, buddy. Jerry Edwards, the head coach at Harker Heights, and this is 365 Sports and the statewide high school football podcast show.
After my first car accident, I feared the biggest damage would be to my wallet. I expected a mountain of bills and a long, drawn-out process. But my Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent was there when I needed her and helped me get back on my feet and in my car in no time. Instead of a hassle, I got reassurance and a quick recovery.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
Smoaky.com presents the Texas High School Football Show on 365 Sports. Brought to you by Peters Chevrolet, Bubba's 33, TFNB, your bank for life, and Texas Farm Bureau Insurance.
We're now joined by Copperas Cove head football coach Tony Johnson on the statewide high school football podcast powered by 365 Sports and Smoaky.com. Tony Johnson of Copperas Cove. They have Midway on Friday night. And both teams are in need of a win, no question about it, to keep their playoff hopes alive. Tony, thanks for your time. You and I discussed really even well back before the season started about having you on, and we just had Jerry Edwards at Harker Heights, and they've had to deal with some of this as well. And as a military brat myself, I know the challenges of coaching near a military installation. What have the challenges been so far from what you've seen your first year?
Well, that's a great question. Well, first of all, Smoke, I tell you that the challenges that we're facing are cultural related. We're trying to change the culture from a losing mindset to one of that is a competitive spirit, one that is about, seeing the value and working hard every day. And while we have quite a few kids that are of the military ill, if you will, they have parents that are serving or have served, that work ethic has been lost in terms of a football mindset. So we spend an enormous amount of time talking about our culture. I know that's a buzzword, but for us, we spend an enormous amount of time trying to preach our culture because we've done this before and just trying to get our kids to believe in themselves and have that confidence.
Yeah, and that's a word that we hear a lot now because, you hear it about the University of Texas and what they've been through for the last decade, or what Matt Rule did when he arrived at Baylor, among some others as well. When you say culture, is that commitment? Is that work ethic? Is there another part of that word? Is that just knowing who you're supposed to be across the board as a person, a player?
Well, we believe that you're either compelled or you're resistant. I believe in the Jeff Jansen model. So like every day, if my wife asks me to take out the trash or clean up my room or any of those things, I have to be compelled, right? I have a choice. And so we believe the same thing as an athlete. You're compelled or you're resistant. Sometimes you're going to fall in the middle, which is just existent. And so you can't exist. You can't just be there every day and go through the motions. A compelled person is a magnet. They draw others to them. with their work ethic, with their play, with their mindset, how they handle academics, how they treat people. So we preach a lot about being compelled in everything you do. And so when you really start to buy into that, for instance, when I bought into that personally, I realized the alarm goes off at 4:45, my feet hit the floor. I realize if I'm walking in the parking lot at Walmart and there's a piece of trash on the ground, I pick it up. It's not my trash, but I throw it away. So I've even bought in to the compelled mindset when I read that. Like, how can I preach this if I'm not teaching it? It's the little things that matter. And so for us, that's what we focus on.
You know, as a military kid who lived all over the world and the country, that's kind of how I was grown. That's how I grew up. Would you not think that military students would have that already in their system?
Yes, of course. You have some of that. But, you know, we have 258 kids in our program. Not everybody's affiliated with Fort Hood. Not everybody's affiliated with the military. So, again, it's a structural thing that's been, you know, Copperas Cove has been down for a while. And we're tasked with the job of trying to turn it around. And that takes, you know, Johnny's and Joe's, right? It's not always X's and O's. It's not always coaching. So we know it takes a family and everybody buying into that mindset that we believe will eventually turn into winning. But certainly, yes, of course, if you have some military kids, they know that, right? Much like yourself, much like myself, my father was Air Force. So, you know, those values were ingrained in me growing up, but not every child is getting that in our program.
You have coached at a lot of places, and you have been a part of rebuilding jobs. And you coached, of course, you were in Kansas, and then what you've done since you've arrived in Texas. What brought you to the state of Texas?
Dennis Francione, former head football coach at TCU in Alabama and many other places himself. I would work camps like a lot of young football coaches coming up. Back in the day, major universities would have 3-day overnight camps. You don't do that so much. And it would give a high school coach an opportunity to go learn, a high school coach an opportunity to go make connections. And I did that. I worked Nebraska, Kansas, K-State, made a ton of connections in doing that. Missouri, Colorado, all of them. And met Dennis Francione at TCU. He's a Kansas native himself. Gary Patterson was a Kansas native. Hit it off. Left after one of those camps, and I got a phone call. Was asked if I was interested in GA. To be honest with you, Smoak, I didn't know what a GA was. I didn't know what that meant. And so literally 2 days before football practice at Shawnee Mission West, Kansas, I went and resigned and took a GA position with Dennis at TCU and never looked back. A couple of bowl wins, great experiences, great connections with coaches that are still coaching, and got to be around some great NFL level players. I didn't really appreciate it at the time when I was 25 or 26, but as I've gotten older and I'm almost 50 now, you know, I look back on those experiences fondly. That's what got me in Texas. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, I've got a lot of jobs, and I shouldn't say unfortunately, that's a bad thing to say, but that college experience so young in life as it does to young coaches, I think makes people chase maybe things that they shouldn't. And so I began to chase different college jobs, trying to be something maybe I wasn't. And then I realized around 2007, you know, my purpose was as a high school coach. That's what the good Lord has allowed me to thrive in and to be in. And I realized that was my purpose. It wasn't about me. It was about others. And so, you know, I began to make my focus be high school coaching. And unfortunately, this I can say, no one is handing you South Lake Carroll. No one is handing you Lake Travis. No one is handing you Allen High School. Your role is in this life to take broken things and try to fix them. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't.
You mentioned TCU, LaDainian Tomlinson, the Hall of Famer, of course, record-breaking running back who's from Waco and went to University High. You had a chance to be around him at that time. What did you learn about him?
An unbelievable work ethic. So he comes in as his sophomore year. People don't forget this. He's playing fullback, selfless. He's by far one of the best running backs in the program at the time. Maybe you'll know this name, but Basil Mitchell was the starter. Basil Mitchell's
from Mount Pleasant, Texas. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And so Basil's a senior, highly draftable player, and so LT has to play fullback and play backup. And so one thing I remember about him was he would catch 1,000 footballs a week off a jugs machine after practice. Just had a great work ethic and a great young man. I currently serve on his Character of Champions program. We were meeting monthly when I lived in the Dallas area. I'm not able to get to those meetings now, but he's done so much for the sport and for the game, and he's a great young man.
You know what's interesting? You bring him up playing fullback. Earl Campbell, when he was at Texas early on, was a fullback, and eventually became, of course, when Fred Akers arrived, they moved him to that tailback position. And, well, the rest is history for him, another Hall of Famer. You mentioned rebuilding and where you're placed. I know W.T. White was a tremendous challenge. I know all about the history of a lot of the schools in the Dallas area. South Oak Cliff, of course, broke that long drought. And then 88 Carter, which is not in the book, but we know they won the state title. What was that like, the challenges of Dallas ISD and trying to rebuild a program and getting W.T. White to the playoffs for the first time in 4 decades?
I think the biggest challenge at Dallas White and in most Dallas high schools is this. The kids are so transient. And that's what attracted me to Cove was I've got, for the most part, I've got my kids. In Dallas, you could wake up one morning and your starting left tackle could be at South Oak Cliff. Your starting receiver could be at Hillcrest. And there wasn't a lot of what I would call necessary checks and balances that helped us keep kids. So if you go to 635 in Welch, which is where W.T. White sits, every home in that area is a $600,000+ home. Those kids don't go to school at White. They go to Dallas Jesuit. They go to Episcopal Parish. They go to Hillcrest. They go to other schools where maybe there's a little more affluency. So we didn't have neighborhood kids. We didn't have neighborhood. So we had to build from within a program that was 2-28 and really start with that culture piece. Same thing we're doing here, and convince kids that we were energetic, go to the junior highs. We sent a varsity coach to every junior high practice. We sent a varsity coach to multiple junior high games. They saw us at track meets, basketball games. We made it an emphasis that as a 7th and 8th grader, you wanted to play for Coach Johnson or Coach Evans or Coach Westbrook or whoever it may be that's part of my staff. You were going to have that relationship and that connection. And that's the same thing we're doing here.
You know, Cove had a great history, and you mentioned that they've now kind of just forgotten how to win. And then there's some things that have slipped through the cracks and transitioned now as well. What's going to be like that time you finally do get that, you turn that corner? What's that like for a coach, and what's that like to know the kids feel that too?
Well, again, I've seen this movie before. There are things happening right now at Cove that are aha moments for me because they were things I saw happening, in Dallas year 1 and year 2. I think it's turning a little quicker here, again, because you have your kids. But the thing that, to me, that becomes such an issue is, when you start to see the successes, success leaves clues. When you start to see the little victories, those leave clues, and you build upon those one by one. For us, you cannot turn a cruise ship on a dime. You can turn a speedboat on a dime, but you can't turn a cruise ship on a dime. 6A football is a cruise ship. The people they ask us to play, the Waco Midways of the world, the Huttos, the Temples, the Harker Heights, those are massive, daunting tasks. At White, we faced Duncanville. We would play J.J. Pierce. We would play Skyline when they were good. We got in the playoffs and we played Frisco Lone Star. Those were the types of teams we now play day in and day out in this district. It's not just 2 times, it's 5 times. So to me, you try to build on those little successes. But back to the question you originally asked, when you notice it and when you see it, you talk about it and you preach it and you honor it and you point it out to the kids and you say, look, this is a moment right here.
And Tony, thanks for your time today. Do you drink any kind of energy drinks, or is this just you?
I'm Italian, man. We talk with our hands and we have energy. My mom's an Italian immigrant, man. This is what you get. But the only drink I might drink, I can't talk about on here.
Hey, I love your passion. I appreciate it. I've kind of followed you along the way. Appreciate your story. Good luck against Midway on Friday, but also with what you're doing to turn this big, huge ship around, as you mentioned. And I know you have the passion and the experience to do that. Tony Johnston at Copperas Cove, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a blessed day.
I'll see you Friday. Tony Johnston, the head coach at Copperas Cove. They play Midway on Friday, District 12, 6A. And this is the Statewide High School Football Podcast, powered by 365 Sports and Smoaky.com.
Yeah! Are y'all ready? Are y'all ready? What? Yeah! Y'all ready to play some football? If you want to, you can get it.
Pizza, burgers, and Bears football. There's no place around Waco that serves them all other than Bubba's 33. Come show your green and gold and enjoy some of Waco's best food and beverages while watching your favorite team, the Bears. When real Bears fans get hungry, Bubba's 33 is the #1 spot for ice-cold drinks, hand-stretched, stone-baked pizzas, and bacon-infused burgers. Join us for indoor or patio dining. Bubba's 33, Waco's restaurant and proud supporter of Baylor Bears football. Sick 'em, Bears!
Smoaky.com presents the Texas High School Football Show on 365 Sports. Brought to you by Peters Chevrolet, Bubba's 33, TFNB, your bank for life, and Texas Farm Bureau Insurance.
We will hear from Copperas Cove head coach Tony Johnson in just a moment. Some of the good and the bad about being near or attached to any kind of military, Air Force base, Army, Navy, obviously Air Force or elsewhere, Marines, and what the challenges are. You might say, man, they got guys coming in all the time, and they also have them leaving as far as athletes from different sports. But back to what I said earlier in the opening segment about one of the games that caught my attention. When I saw that score, Cherokee 78, Richland Springs 47, it caught my attention. Richland Springs doesn't lose much, but remember, Jerry Burkhart, the 9-time state championship coach in six-man football, was suspended earlier this year and also suspended for 3 years for tampering and recruiting. He faced the UIL. They suspended him. They did not blink an eye. He is out for 3 years. And so that's not to try to take away from Cherokee's win, but it is an historical note. Cherokee's win against Richland Springs in district play last weekend was the first district loss for Richland Springs since October 26th of 2001. I'll give Garrett Ross credit for this one. October 26th of 2001, 21 years ago, basically, Richland Springs lost to another, what used to be a power in six-man football, Panther Creek, 62-36. Here's my conversation with Copperas Cove head coach Tony Johnson. All right, we can do the elite games. I thought I highlighted some of them. I thought I did. Hold on real quick. Novasad. Okay, hold on. Is this right? Yeah, it is. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. All right, to wrap up week number 8 of the high school football season in Texas, powered by 365 Sports and also Smoaky.com. And you see the sponsors as we have them to start, and throughout the show, we appreciate all of them. Here are the games of the week according to pigskinprep.com. Jerry Forrest, our great friend. And you'll see the numbers on the screen. The ranking of each team to the left in parentheses. And then on the right, you'll see a number, like the number 11 at the top right-hand corner for the game between Columbus and Hitchcock, 2 7-0 teams. The lower the number on the right, the better the game based on the rankings of Jerry Forrest and Pigskin Prep of where teams are ranked in specific classifications. So Columbus is ranked number 2. Hitchcock is number 9. That's 11. That's pretty easy math. The number on the right, these are the best games according to the index figures of Jerry Forrest and his website. Aledo, there's number 4 in the state. They've lost twice. Burlington Centennial 6-0, a great story this year. They've had a couple of quality wins, no question about it. They're a team that is right now with a lot of momentum. Aledo's a slight favorite in that game, if Jerry by like a point. But Aledo's been, they lost that game early, the Dallas Episcopal. They've had a couple of losses. That will be fun to watch. Also, a couple of notches down, China Spring and La Vega. They've met a lot. They've met a lot in over the years in the playoffs. And China Spring coming off the state championship. La Vega 4-3. They've been down. They've had some injuries too, but they've just not quite hit their stride. They'll get China Spring and La Vega, they'll get their best shot. China Spring with one loss is to Paris Episcopal, a couple of weeks ago, 6-1. McCollum, the quarterback's putting up big numbers. They're really good, and they're playing well on defense, and they've kind of got a swagger about them, so that's one of the elite games. Down a little bit more, Westlake and Dripping Springs. Westlake's the favorite, but Dripping Springs, remember, is unbeaten, and their quarterback is Austin Novosad, the young man committed to Baylor. This will be fun to watch as Dripping Springs has moved up a notch with who they're playing in competition as far as classification. And Westlake and Dripping Springs at 6-0 and 6-0. Chapel Hill about 3 or 4 games down against Lindale in East Texas. Chapel Hill with those young playmakers, Demetrius Brisbane, the quarterback, starting to play at the level we saw him play at the end of last year. And again, Lindale with Chris Cochran, they're always solid. 4-3 Lindale. Chapel Hill's probably about a 2-touchdown favorite in that game. Right below that game, Carthage, they just a huge favorite, but a game to think about. Carthage 7-0. They're just beating everyone up. And Rusk is 4-2. They could put up some points, but they face that ultimate challenge against Carthage. Cisco and Stanford, great game here. Absolutely one of the best games whenever they play. Cisco and Stanford. Cisco's a slight favorite. Stanford's down to number 16 overall in the rankings for Jerry, even though they are 6-0. So those are some of the games. There's also that game between Heritage and Ennis. I bring that one up. Heritage is a pretty heavy favorite. Ennis is 2-4. That's uncharacteristic. They have played really good people. Right below that game, Anna and Kaufman, good one there. Anna unbeaten, Kaufman 5-1, running back last week that ran for 260 yards. So think about that one. Those are the elite games. The number to the right, the lower the number, the better the game is based on the rankings, index, and ratings overall on pigskinprep.com. Okay, thanks to Jacob Wilson for running the mothership. Thanks to Tony Johnson of Copperas Cove and Jerry Edwards, the head coach at Harker Heights. We love high school football. Hope you enjoy the show. Back again next week. I'm David Smoak for all of our sponsors. This is the Texas High School Football Statewide Podcast powered by 365 Sports and Smoaky.com. Battle in the gun with Hill to his right. Play action to the right. Steps up, throws over the middle. He's got Thornton. Caught it! Junior Thornton. Split. 6. Touchdown. Midway.
Smoaky.com presents the Texas High School Football Show on Sikkim 365 Radio. Brought to you by Peters Chevrolet, Bubba's 33, TFNB, your bank for life, and Texas Farm Bureau Insurance.
Hill, right side, finds a seam. Hill, 20. Hill, 10. Hill, touchdown. Midway, no flags. Midway takes the lead by more than one score. And how about the Big Uglies inside?